Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Stephen Bowie. I'm with AWS Managed Services. I'm joined by James Armitage, who comes from our professional services organization in Vancouver, BC, and then John Sankovic with SMX. Now, what's fun about this, you might wonder, why are two managed service providers on stage talking with each other, and it's not violent? So we've got a story. We'll explain some of that here in a little bit. So for our agenda today, we're going to talk about what AWS Managed Services is and how we will support you as your operational partner. We're going to talk about AMS and our new entry into the GovCloud region, our new availability in the GovCloud region, use cases for AWS Managed Services, the roadmap for our offering, a little bit of the AMS overview, and then John's going to share his experience working with us at SMX. So as your operational partner, there's a lot of ways that AMS can help you as an organization that's consuming AWS or operating in the GovCloud region. Now we can be there to support your new workloads that you're building in the cloud. We're also in position to take over AWS accounts that you're already operating. The workloads in those accounts where you want additional help, you may want additional monitoring, additional work around best practices and making sure that you're doing the right things as you consume the cloud. We do offer fast onboarding, so we can, from the moment you ask for additional help on AWS, we can come into your account within 2 weeks, be onboarded, be providing 24/7 monitoring, using our runbooks to give you better outcomes. So we can move very quickly, which may not be the case with traditional managed service providers. Many organizations, especially in this economy, are looking for additional help. They may be dealing with a skills scarcity, or they may not have the people they need to operate on AWS, or especially AWS in the GovCloud region. And so we can provide additional scale and capacity to your team. And that doesn't have to be a replacement of an existing team, but some organizations want to run a small, lean cloud practice team and want additional help from AWS on how to leverage and scale that team out. Other teams may just have specific skills that they have gaps around, and they have a team, but they want to learn and grow and want a partner who can help them do that. Additionally, we leverage native AWS services, so we're not building lots of proprietary code when we provide customers with support. We build on accounts using native AWS capacity, native AWS services, so if you decide to go a different direction, or maybe your team is scaled up and you don't need support anymore, you're not in a situation where you've built reliance on a bunch of proprietary code and features that you then have to replace. You can select the services and the SLAs that you need, so you can run any AWS native service in an account that we manage. You can run third-party tools out of the AWS marketplace. You can make all those choices yourself. And then we offer different SLAs. So if you have production accounts where you need really tight SLAs for critical workloads, or maybe you have development environments where your needs are different, you can choose the SLAs that best fit your use case and your need. And then lastly, we're a provider that is consumed and billed the way you already pay for AWS. It's a consumption-based pricing. It's not pricing that's based on some metric other than consumption, so the billing makes sense to existing AWS customers. So I'm going to hand over the clicker to James. He's going to talk about the GovCloud region and what GovCloud is.
Thank you, Stephen. Real pleasure to meet all of you today and have this conversation. So I'm James Armitage. I work with public sector professional services in a security capacity, and I work with AMS and with our partners to help, deploy and build and then hand off. And GovCloud is a pretty strategic read. We need this for our customers. Our customers have asked, and as we build, there's a specific portfolio of services available within GovCloud, and so it's nice to have partners and the build capability to get those workloads off the ground. Part of GovCloud is for compliance with ITAR or other residency requirements and management requirements within that space. Now, we see this often, right? GovCloud is another AWS region that we operate, and so a lot of the build that you'll see still occurs within the commercial region, as you would expect. The use cases though, we can help you accelerate what you need to do to get an ATO, to meet those compliance requirements. And the highest standards of data privacy and security are further augmented within GovCloud because we know we're operating with US residents and US persons. Did you want to add anything on that? I think.
Nothing really to add in terms of this, but this is a new region for AMS, and obviously people think of managed services as being a people-driven operation. And so typically the question would be, well, where are the people operating from? Are you meeting all the standards required to operate in the GovCloud region? And one thing I'll say about AMS is our service is not built on people, even though we're providing services that typically have been delivered by people. 97% of the work items that AMS delivers every day for our customers are driven through automation. And so rather than hiring cleared people in very specific localities to do things like perform a backup, we deliver that work with automation, which allows us and our customers to move faster and to get the outcomes they want at a significantly lower cost. Okay, at this point, we're now going to introduce John Sankovich. He's the president of cloud at SMX. SMX is a strategic partner. And I did say we were going to let you in on a little secret how John came to be standing on stage with the two of us. So welcome, John.
Sure, so I appreciate it. I'm John Sankovich, the president of cloud at SMX. And for those of you who don't know, SMX is a premier AWS consulting partner, also an audited managed service provider, and DevOps, migration, many competencies, including GovCloud. And so should I tell the story now?
Yeah, why don't you tell us how we met, John?
So interesting story is, as we were kind of going through our journey with AMS, we actually competed, both Amazon and AMS, as one kind of proposed solution for a customer in the commercial world, and then also SMX. And as it turned out, we both lost. We lost to another company that, and so after that, because of our strategic partnership, we really didn't know we were competing at the time, but afterwards we were comparing notes. And to be honest, it was just one of those eye-opening things for us. I think we alluded a little bit to, well, is it competitive to MSPs? And we said, obviously we're missing something in the market if we both lost. Why didn't we win? And as we walked through it, it was really that, at times, questions about global scale came up with us. And at times with AMS, potentially, it was, how can you be flexible and nimble when you're Amazon? And given the size of the business. And so we basically looked and said, what if we combine the two strengths of the global scalability and obviously what AWS and AMS bring to the table, and then what could we do to be a little bit more flexible, maybe a little bit more able to adjust with a specific requirement for a customer versus kind of the scale that AMS operates at. So from that point, we have strategically collaborated, and we like to think at this point we're one of the leading AMS strategic partners, and integrating those platforms. What we want to do is not replicate what, to be honest, AMS can do better. And so at scale, they're going to be the best through the automation. And so really what we wanted to drive on was, well, what's outside of that scope, and how can we additionally supplement that? And all of a sudden, the customer gets, the best of both, and also the ability to focus on what they should be doing, which is their mission, not so much worrying about backups and other things. So kind of a funny story, but we were competitors. Neither of us won, and then we decided maybe we should join forces more.
And I think a word I heard used frequently was intimacy. Our service is a lot of automation. You're really wedded to your customer. You've got very deep relationships with them. You've helped them build their applications. You understand the applications. Could you speak to how you've built that intimacy and why it matters in this relationship?
Yeah, the reality is we've been in business for 25 years. Part of that business always focused on public sector. And for us, the mission comes first. So one of our core values is how we accelerate a customer's mission. And so, for us over those years, we've really kind of invested in those missions, understand them. Department of Defense is a great example, a deep culture within our company supporting DoD. So really it's years of experience, and then really how can we do that, as I said before, so that customers can focus on other things. That's our mission. and accelerating that. I think you mentioned the word accelerate. So, accelerate our outcomes, and then also adapt is another, adapt deliberately.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about ITAR on GovCloud, and I'm going to hand the microphone back to James.
All right, thank you. ITAR is one of the prime reasons why our customers come and build in GovCloud, and we have this available both in our US East and West regions. And I had mentioned previously, but some of the requirements that are associated to this is US soil, US citizens, and that operating model to help you meet the shared responsibility requirements that you'll have to deliver a workload through to completion. Now, AMS is able to meet and help maintain, right? We talk a lot around the shared responsibility model, and I find that AMS is a really healthy uplift to that shared responsibility model that carries more of the undifferentiated heavy lifting of operations and maintenance. We frequently speak to undifferentiated heavy lifting of our data centers and those services, and AMS is an augment and an extension to that. The critical and high availability workloads, that is not a unique feature to GovCloud, but it is really excellent that it's available in there as well. So our customers have freedom to build to as much availability as they want within the region, and we support that, and AMS supports patching, monitoring, maintenance, and other operational requirements. I apologize, I probably should have put this first, but what is ITAR? So the International Traffic in Arms Regulations related to weaponry and other controlled goods, typically in support of our warfighters and our defense, our DIB, the Defense Industrial Base. And this is not unique to the United States. There are ITAR similar requirements in other nations around the world, but this is the one that really GovCloud provides a pretty significant uplift on.
Yeah, so helping customers with ITAR, we help both customers and partners achieve our ITAR compliance or regulations. So for one, both customers and partners have work to do to build on GovCloud, and AMS has done a lot of that work for them by building automations for patch management, for backup, for monitoring, on top of the existing GovCloud region. So if you're a customer that wants to build on AWS, if you use AMS, that work's been done for you. If you're a partner that's providing ISV solutions, or a partner like SMX that's delivering applications for their end customer, both of those organizations are able to accelerate their outcome of getting that workload running in that regulated region faster. Now, an important point, I already mentioned that the AMS people are really not all that involved in our customer accounts. It's primarily automation that is driving that work. But there are two key points here. If AMS does have to provide people, we will provide them from the right soil and with the right citizenship. So you can be confident that the people who are performing this work in an ITAR region are going to be US citizens on US soil. But even then, AWS offers you features like KMS, where you can encrypt the data in that region, ensure that that data is encrypted at rest or while it's in motion. So even your third-party MSP that's operating in the account doesn't have access to that data, even if those people have the right citizenship or sitting on the right soil. So pricing, I'll speak to this one, though as a security person, I hate to get into pricing conversations. We're all security people up here, so somebody's got to cover this one. There are two different SLAs, Plus and Premium. The pricing is a combination of per instance hour for EC2 and an uplift on the other AWS usage in the account. That pricing varies for services we don't add a ton of value to. It's very low or non-existent. For services like S3, or SSM, where we're adding a lot of additional value, the uplift we charge is going to be higher. But an important point here is it's very transparent to our customers. It shows up just as a line item in your bill. You can see exactly what that pricing is, and then it's driven by consumption. So you don't see fees that are just by being a customer. You've got to pay some crazy amount. It is at a higher price point in the GovCloud region just due to the people requirements, the citizenship requirements, and the soil requirements associated with delivering that service. Pricing, I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail on this slide. I don't think that matters so much. But all of this is available. You can work with your account team to understand this pricing and how it would impact you. But you can see that it is broken out by tier. If you want the premium SLA, it costs a little bit more based on the instance hour. And then there's an uplift based on the usage. One thing to note here is we don't charge based on the size of the instance. So you could have a medium-sized instance or a very large instance. What we found is that the work we provide, making sure an instance is patched, making sure it's backed up, monitoring that instance, doesn't really depend on the size of the instance. And so we don't charge more just because you're running a larger instance. Our older pricing models didn't take this into account. It was just based on the pure metered bill, and so that would kind of favor some customers felt like that wasn't really customer focused in terms of how we were pricing. There is a monthly minimum fee, and we're not trying to. It's not a fixed fee so much as just making sure that the support we provide by providing a cloud service delivery manager and a cloud architect. Those are two humans that need to eat, that we're meeting the monthly minimums to cover the cost of the service we provide via those two individuals. Business or enterprise support is required, and you get all the benefits of business or enterprise support that AWS provides through those tiers. And then AMS is really that premium uplift to deliver outcomes over the top of that. Lastly, there are many little things that customers come along and ask us for that aren't delivered via automation. Things that are not delivered by support, maybe even not delivered by a partner. That's things like can you come on site and run a disaster recovery game day for us? Or can you come on site and run a security game day for us? And so we do provide a service called Ops on Demand, where some of those odds and ends that customers want that get them the outcomes they need are delivered through that Ops on Demand, and then you just buy standard blocks of hours to get those outcomes. Sometimes those features are actually delivered by ProServe, and then we just pull ProServe in at those pricing points and resell ProServe to customers. But it's all with an eye towards getting a customer an outcome. So to John's point, helping them achieve their mission. So a couple things coming up on the roadmap that are of keen interest for folks in this space. We are expecting our FedRAMP High pre-ATO to come in Q3. We currently have a FedRAMP Moderate ATO, but that's not of a whole ton of use to folks in GovCloud. So that's Q3 when FedRAMP High comes. DOT IL4 and IL5, we anticipate that arriving in Q4. We are looking at providing support for PIV and CAT cards for authentication, and then government-provided laptops, and then meeting additional background checks. Though in many cases, when we work where we deliver through a partner like SMX, those last things don't really matter because SMX's staff are taking on that 3% of the work that's done by a human and isn't automated. So that gives customers the choice to purchase that through a partner who already has people likely on site with the right clearances that are already tenured with that customer or using Amazon. Okay, a few things kind of talk about for AMS, because some questions I'm sure are still lingering in the room in terms of what AMS is. Typically, customers buy AMS for one of the 5 things we have up on the screen. Security tends to be number 1. Customers say, we will really need to get security right. We want Amazon's help. Can you help us with security? That comes in two forms. First, we're continually monitoring customer accounts and letting them know how they're doing with regard to adoption of security best practice. The second thing is we do 24/7 monitoring of both GuardDuty and Macie. So if GuardDuty tells you that there are specific threats against your account, or if there are indicators of compromise in your account, let's say there's an EC2 instance that's talking to an IP address with a bad reputation, GuardDuty will create an alarm. And that's a great value. It's a great service AWS provides. But many organizations say, hey, when those alarms fire, we want some help. We want somebody who really understands AWS to help us run down that alarm, understand what it needs, and how do you effectively respond to that alarm. The second thing is availability. We've seen a lot of cases where customers have built on AWS. They were trying to quickly get to an outcome. So maybe they just built into a single availability zone, or maybe their application's critical and it's only deployed in one region. And so they want our help to make sure that they've built in the right way, or maybe they've built in 2 regions, but they're not doing regular game days to see if they can actually recover and fail over from one region to another. And we step in and we help customers really make sure that their availability goals for their workloads can be met, that they've architected appropriately, but also built the processes and are testing those processes to get the availability outcomes they want. The third domain is efficiency. So many organizations love AWS, love building on AWS, but they haven't figured out how to maintain consistency of cost, predictability of cost, or maybe identify those opportunities. And so our teams meet with our customers monthly, and we're looking at things like underutilized resources. Maybe you're running the wrong size EC2 instances, and we can give you the same outcomes by downsizing. So we run consistent checks. We frequently break our own revenue forecasts because we get too good in this area and help customers right size. But that's an important thing. Customers want that outside perspective on how they can use AWS in the most cost-effective way. Resiliency, helping customers making better choices with their applications so that they can recover when incidents do occur. And then lastly, compliance tends to be a really difficult topic, whether you're talking about health data that needs to be HIPAA compliant or HITRUST compliant, payment card data that needs to be PCI compliant. Most of our customers understand this space, they understand these requirements, but learning how to meet them on AWS, they want help directly from Amazon to help them understand some of these things. So we help, these tend to be those areas where AMS steps in and helps our customers out. So a few things in terms of how we do that with security. We've got about 97 config rules that we've built that align to the NIST and the CIS, that Center for Internet Security, benchmarks for AWS. So we're running those continuously in accounts. And there are lots of products that will do that. Frankly, we're not the only one in town. But many organizations aren't getting the outcome they want because they've got these checks running, and when they realize they've got an EC2 instance that's directly accessible from the internet, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to go fix that. So we do 2 things in this space. One, we meet with our customers when they have rule violations and talk about what that means and what the risk is, but we also talk about what plan, what response we're going to run to fix that. In many of those cases, we actually fix it with automation. So if we see GuardDuty is turned off in an account or CloudTrail is turned off in an account, we don't wait to talk to the customer. We just turn it back on because they want that thing to be fixed. Now these 90-odd config rules can also be easily mapped to other standards like PCI or HIPAA. So we're not limiting customers by building to those 2 standards. What we've actually done is deduplicated all of those different config rules you would need to get to different standards. And we're running that smaller number of checks to give them the right outcome, but with an efficient price point. We also have about 74 GuardDuty alarms or finding types that we utilize to monitor the health and safety of accounts. We made a decision early on to use GuardDuty in all the accounts we manage. We'd built about 3 or 4 proprietary security alarms for AMS. GuardDuty comes along with 50 plus alarms when they launched. And we just knew we were never going to be able to keep up with that service. So we've replaced all of our proprietary alarms that AMS built with GuardDuty. The second piece is proactive management or incident management. We find that we identify about 80% of our customer incidents before the customer is aware of them or before there's even an impact to the application. So if the EC2 structure that their application residing on is going to be turned off, or there's something happening there, we'll use automation to trigger a response and fix that workload and make sure there's not an incident before it even happens. We're monitoring services like the personal health dashboard, notifications from the abuse team, and looking for issues before they become real issues. We frequently identify that a customer might have an exposed key before the customer is even aware of it, and we're able to prevent an incident and then work with them to get rid of that long-lived credential and replace it with something better. From an automation perspective, I mentioned about 97% of what we do is automated. That comes down to 1.5 million executions of System Manager docs every month. So the vast majority of things we're doing, patching, backup, all of these just day-to-day things you've got to do in IT to get a good outcome, we're doing that all with automation and not humans. That does 2 things. One, in these cleared spaces, it means we're not using cleared individuals who are expensive and highly sought after. to do basic routine tasks like patching a system or backing it up. It's all done with automation. And second, even though those cleared people are excellent and highly sought after, humans make mistakes. And so by replacing a human to do normal day-to-day IT with automation, we eliminate any possibility of that mistake happening. 3 final points here. We've got really deep AWS expertise. We pull a lot of people out of our support organization, other service teams at AWS. And so we've got a really broad and deep bench of people who really understand AWS, have been here for the building of AWS. And that expertise is made available to all of our customers 24 hours a day. The cost optimization I mentioned earlier, where we're seeing 10 to 15% annual savings in operational and AWS cost savings. And then the patch is really important. We've seen customers that were averaging 30 to 40% on their monthly patch, getting them up into the 95 to 97% range. Some of these organizations had given up on patching, and were patching like once a year before they adopted AMS. And that leads to all kinds of problems when you're that far behind on your patching, and you're trying to patch something in Linux that the entire repo's name has changed, and you can't go back that far in time and patch it. By getting people up to this regular cadence of patching, we're reducing security incidents and helping them with their compliance outcomes. So a few features here with AMS. I'm not going to go into all of these. We do create an enhanced change record, which is very important from a compliance perspective. So organizations can not only see what happened in their account, but they can see who performed that action. If an AMS operator does come into the account, you can even see the ticket or the alarm that they came in to respond to, so you can associate that with that change record. Tagging is critical to getting authentication and authorization right, and understanding who owns what resources. And so we help customers with automating the way their tagging is performed, getting them onto a consistent standard, and then holding people accountable to that. Frequently what we see when you take customer accounts over is we have resources, nobody at the customer knows what that resource is or what it's doing or why it's configured that way. My favorite, we recently took over an account that had a Maria database that was exposed to the entire world, and nobody at the customer knew who owned it or what this database was doing. We provide the proactive incident response I mentioned, and then the backup, not just backup, but backup response. Now, backup on its face is pretty boring. Most organizations we talk to say they're already doing it, they're doing it well. But what we find is most organizations are backing up fewer than 50% of the resources in their account. And if they are backing up, the backup plan they're using isn't resilient against ransomware. Their backups are writable by anybody in the account. So if an attacker is in the account, they're able to compromise a resource. That means they can also go and tamper with the backups to make it hard to recover. Additionally, we also see that while many of our customers are backing up, they're not actually practicing restore. So if they get into a situation where they need to recover from a ransomware attack, they might have backups, but nobody has actually done the work of restoring service to an application using the backups. And so you may as well not have them. So we help our customers plan for and execute disaster recovery game days where they actually test their backups, test to see if they can actually recover. And if things are preventing them from recovering, we help them with that remediative work so that they do know how to resolve those cases, and their team is actually taking that backup all the way through restoration. I think the last thing is that operations demand piece I mentioned. That's where we can provide control tower operations. We can take over Amazon EKS operations for customers who want that, and additional services as an add-on above and beyond the base offering.
If I can extend just a little bit and reiterate on some of what Stephen had just mentioned. From my perspective, working with professional services, we often assist our customers bootstrap and build and then develop further workloads. And they often look to us for their operational readiness and say, what next, right? And the ProServe business model is not to embed or become permanent staff augmentation. We look to our partners and we look to AMS to fulfill that function. You know, as Stephen mentioned, your backup is only as good as your recovery procedure when you've last tested it. Otherwise, you don't truly understand and know. And that's not a critical core skill set that most of our customers need to curate and maintain, right? That's not your core mission, and that's not the core outcome that you're focused on. So it makes a lot of sense operationally to continue to hive off the things that are not taking you directly to where you want to be. In terms of tagging, I really do encourage everyone to have a robust and durable tag strategy and to apply it as early as possible in your environment. So it's really good to have something that's automating it and working with that, right? Tags are free, we do not charge for them, but they're also finite. There's only so many of them that you can apply. So they have an intrinsic value to them. And it's often difficult and time-consuming and therefore expensive to try and retrofit a tagging strategy when you're partway through that journey. So doing that with intention early is a really significant element of a successful long-term cloud journey. Incident response is one of the things that I have many conversations with our customers about. And so any opportunity you have to work with partners, to work with AMS, to improve your incident response capabilities, because you will play as you practice, and the more practice you can get early, the better and more comfortable an IR process will be. And that doesn't have to be a security incident with unintended or adversarial access. It could simply be an IT operations incident. But experience is the thing you get right after you needed it, and it's so much better to do that if you can practice ahead of time.
Yeah, just last week, in fact, we ran a security game day with a customer, and it was the first time that the security team at the customer had sat down with their application owner and run them through a drill. And they told us up front that their security response process was widely known in the organization, but when we sat down with their application team, we found out they had no experience with it at all, didn't know where the runbooks were, didn't know how to execute it. And so we were sort of this forcing function, almost like a marriage counselor, to get the two groups within the customer to sit down and run through some of these drills for the first time. Okay, well, we promised some time at the end for questions, and so here we are. We've got about 15 odd minutes here. Happy to take any questions you might have. We do have microphones in both of the inner aisles, so I'd appreciate if you do have a question to ask via the microphone so everybody can hear you.
So I have two questions that are somewhat related. So regarding billing, you said it's billed like other services in that it's sort of consumption based. Are there plans to make that available via console or API at some point, or is that a nonsensical question from your perspective?
I would say that's nonsensical from my perspective. I think there might be somebody in the back of the room, Michelle, who could actually answer that question for us.
Michelle McFadden, product management from AMS. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
So when you say from console, where you can just turn it on from console?
Yep.
So it's, all I'll say is it's the sort of thing that we've certainly discussed. But,
Okay. I imagine would need to be constrained as well, but there might be some interest.
yeah, I think there's a lot of, what I'd say is I think there's a lot of for us to do more to help more customers. And that's really our goal, is to help customers with their AWS adoption while keeping their security posture.
Thanks. And then the other related one is, or somewhat related, how granularly can one turn this on and off? I don't know if this runs afoul of the "this isn't staff aug," statement, but if there's some foreseen heightened demand, period, can one turn it on for, say, a month, then off, a month or two later?
I'll provide an answer, and then Michelle maybe can provide a more authoritative answer. But we mentioned the 2-week burn-in time. We can't just take an account. It's not like you could turn it on for a few hours and then turn it off.
Yeah.
And some of the benefits do take some onboarding time to really understand the environment in which we're providing service. But we've certainly seen customers that have said, we're moving to the cloud. We have to be out of our data center in 6 months. And we're going to need AMS for 6 months, but after that, we don't think we're going to need it anymore. And we've seen customers who've done both things at the end of that 6 months or that 12 months. Some who said, while we were learning AWS and getting better at it, the service was also improving. And so we actually don't want to turn it off. We actually want to keep going with it. We've seen that reaction. We also saw a customer that was part of a very regulated banking environment. They were owned by an Australian bank, and then they got spun off. And at the end of that, they just said, the rigor we needed and the regulatory environment we lived in, we're not in that anymore, and so we don't need the service anymore, and so they offboarded. So it's not something you would turn on for a few hours and then turn off for a few hours.
Right.
But certainly, because we support month-to-month contracts, it's certainly more dynamic and flexible maybe than your typical MSP.
Okay. Thank you.
Nothing to add.
Oh, well, thank you. You've taught me well, Michelle. Thank you.
Question. How do you address working in spaces that require public trust? So if you're working for a government space and you've got to have a minimum public trust, do you keep a staff level that supports that?
So I'm wondering if one of you would be better served. John, I think you might be better served answering this question.
Yeah, the reality is yes. So for, I think we hit on, AMS has been approved at the FedRAMP moderate level, correct?
Correct.
So a lot of those controls are answered through that. When specific staff is required, we, as a partner, that's, as we were talking a little bit about the 3%, I think that's where a partner comes into play for that 3% or more, and those folks can have any required levels of clearances and all the way up into secure space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going? I got a question. When you say you provide automation scripts, is that going to be on CloudFormation, or can the client select, for example, Terraform and TerraGrunt scripts they already had and you guys build on top of it?
Most of the automation we provide today is via SSM documents.
Okay,
So system manager.
got it. And is AMS on IL6 as of right now, or only GovCloud?
We're in GovCloud now. In Q3, we'll go from FedRAMP moderate to FedRAMP high, and then in Q4, we anticipate IL4 and IL5. I don't have a timeline for IL6 at this time.
All right, thanks.
Any other takers? We've got a room full of people still here. Like, clearly, a lot of people have questions. They just want somebody else to answer them.
This is more of a security question. Is GovCloud just for government customers, government end customers, or can software providers who are supporting the government also use GovCloud and supporting AMS out of this GovCloud region to get a solution that'll be more readily adoptable by the government customers?
I think the answer to your question is not only can they actually have to. So if you're an ISV, you're a software maker that wants to provide your software, whatever that is, to a customer in the government space, if that customer workload requires GovCloud, then you have to provide, or likely have to provide some of that service from the GovCloud region. And so we have heard from some of those organizations who believe they could get there faster and get their product to market faster by building on top of AMS in GovCloud or with SMX in GovCloud than by doing that on their own.
And if I can just extend a little bit on that, very much so, GovCloud is not only for public sector customers, our commercial sectors are welcome to build in that environment as well. What I've observed, though, is that a lot of our commercial customers are often new to the idea of how to obtain an ATO, how to get that authority to operate, and all of the steps and the mechanisms that they have to observe, not just to achieve it in the first place, but then to maintain it and have a continuous ATO and continuous compliance going forward. And that's, it doesn't have to be difficult, but it helps a lot if you've got trusted guides to carry you through the process.
Do you support customers to obtain ATO?
The question was, do we support customers who are seeking to obtain an ATO?
I think that's probably a question of what, typically the way we've worked with them to date is we provide a pre-ATO for all of the controls that AWS and AMS do. Now, there's some work left over for the customer, usually related to their application and some of the work that's left over for them. And we support them in the sense of we provide our pre-ATO to the customer to use with the auditor, but then also work through frequently their requests for evidence that the customer doesn't know how to obtain on AWS if they're new, they're new to AWS. And so our operations team will then work with the customer to get that documentation or that evidence, or configuring the tooling that will provide it to them. One example, we had a customer that used SailPoint on-prem to interrogate their directory services to figure out who was accessing what and when. And we helped them deploy SailPoint in their production environment on AWS to do the exact same thing. So we definitely will help the customer do the work they have to do on that side of the responsibility model.
And just real quick, SMX, that's kind of a core thing, a core value add that we do in collaboration, take that package. We have a whole team that's actually here, led by some folks that are here. And we found that we were doing that for our own. We have a FedRAMP High, IL5 accredited platform. And we just found the more we did that, we found that customers needed that assistance too. So it's something we offer as part of our overall suite.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question, just from your experience. I see how this really makes, a lot of sense for like customers that have developed applications that are cloud native, that are built, with CI/CD pipelines. But let's say like in the federal space, in the DoD space, we do a lot of lift and shift work where we bring over these older legacy applications, like Oracle, SAP, that don't necessarily lend themselves that well to automation. They're more like pets rather than sheep. I mean, what's been your experience around having AMS services for these, monolithic applications?
That's actually been our primary use case. That was the original use case, was organizations that, a favorite of mine, an organization with 10,000 servers and 3 data centers had 12 months to get out of them. And they didn't have the staff to operate those servers once they got to AWS or even to perform the migration. And so we supported them through the migration and then took over operations for these things. Several of these customers have started to modernize and have started to take some of those monolithic applications and re-architect them or modernize them. But we still provide value by protecting the AWS account itself and making sure the AWS account is configured correctly. CloudTrail's turned on, VPC flow logs are enabled, not just with the default setting, but with all the extra fields specified. And so we certainly love those customers that are more modern, but we have a lot of experience. You alluded to the pet versus cattle debate. I sometimes say we run exotic petting zoos. So we're very comfortable in both environments.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Can't just sit here in silence for the next 7 minutes we have this room.
Well, I actually have a question for John. And that was, prior to starting this session, we've had some conversations, and one of the things that jumped out at me was your approach to collaborating with AMS and with AWS and being progressive and kind of riding the wave. And can you kind of explain that a little bit more? Because I think it's a very progressive point of view on how you like to partner with AMS and AWS and what you've experienced from that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I remember sitting with Michelle probably a couple years ago, and it was really stepping back and trying to figure out where can we add the most value to support a customer mission. And at that time, AMS was in different stages, and we just looked at it and said, we see the value in AWS. One of our kind of guiding principles is everybody should do what they're best at. Customers are best at providing, if you're in the government, citizen services or national defense. They probably shouldn't be the best at developing data centers, And what we saw where AWS was headed with AMS and said, they're going to be the best at a core scope. We don't know what that looks like in a year from now. And so we decided that this concept of like adapting deliberately, where we look and we go, okay, at this point in time, who's the best to do certain functions? And that might change in 6 months. And to be honest, as customers, I think it's worth you also looking at that journey. What are you the best at? And if you're not the best at quality and scale and delivery and value in something, then look at maybe there's other options. And so that's the same journey we have been on. And I think it's worked out well. It sometimes hurts a little bit because you say, well, why aren't we better than AMS at something? But the reality is we had to look in the mirror and say, what are we really good at? We're good at taking fundamental building blocks and turning them into platforms that then customers enable them to utilize the way they want to best. So we've spent a lot of time kind of looking at ourselves and figuring that out, and I think it's benefited us, but it's not always easy. So I would say that constant every 6 months looking at it or whatever period, I think it's healthy for everyone, and I think that being able to adapt and then pivot. Maybe you want to do your own security for some reason. Look at the services that are out there, and in the case of what AMS is offering, can you do it better? Can you do it at scale? Can you do it less expensive? If you can, then definitely embrace it. But for us, that's been part of that journey. And it's just also a deep trust with AWS. In our journey, we've been supported by this entire team. So every time we come up on something, we have weekly calls with the AMS team talking about what our services look like, what our solutions look like, who's best to go after certain customer engagements. So it's just a deep trust in AWS and the AMS team, and then kind of introspectively trying to figure out what we should be the best at, knowing that that's going to change. And I think it's a great thing that AWS does. I think it's great for customers also and partners. And we're having the same discussions so far. Probably 7 different ISVs. Who initially might think that they should do their own managed services or they should do their own, we talked about PATOs. And the reality is just sat with one that you probably are aware of and walked them through and said, what are you really good at? Is it getting a PATO or is it getting FedRAMP approved? And our team that's sitting in the back, we do this every day. And so I think ISVs are also looking at this model, seeing where can it really benefit. And the reality is our solutions are powered by AMS versus like competing. And so that's the journey that we're on. And I'm sure it'll change and evolve as we go in the coming months.
If I can just play that back so everyone hears, it's how are AI, artificial intelligence, and ML, machine learning, being incorporated into the security operations and monitoring lifecycle?
Yeah, so for that, some of that is very visible. So as an example, our dependency on GuardDuty, which is using some of those things itself. And so GuardDuty right now will tell us, somebody just logged into an account. They normally only log in from New York, and today they logged in from Paris. And that's an example of where GuardDuty is actually using some of that under the hood and giving us that intelligence. And we didn't have to build that. We just inherited that control from GuardDuty. It does the same thing with telling us when a machine is communicated on a port it's never communicated on before. Or it's told us when there's a lot of traffic that's unexpected. We once found a subcontractor at one of our customers had uploaded all the source code off a machine up to his personal Git account, and GuardDuty uncovered that activity for us and gave us that observation. So that's like a very open example. We're also using similar capabilities internally to our service that I can't really speak to because they're internal proprietary, but we're using similar tools to examine our access. So looking at the logs and the patterns for our employees who are potentially going across multiple customer accounts, we need to inspect their access to make sure they're not doing something either underhanded or their credentials aren't being misused or repurposed by somebody else. And that's a great example of a use case where we're using technologies like that inside our service.
We are right up against the end of the day, and thank you again for coming and joining us. I hope that the summit is being really, really helpful to you and increasing your knowledge and understanding of AWS. One of the things that we're really driven by is our customer feedback, and so please take the opportunity, if you could, fill in our session survey. It only helps us get better, and we want to hear from you so that we can give more interesting, more engaging, and just more content that is going to meet your needs. So with that, thank you all very much today. I hope it's been a great first day.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.